The atmosphere surrounding Andre has grown incredibly suffocating, transforming his once ordered and meticulously managed life into a chaotic nightmare of relentless anxiety. For days, he has been entirely consumed by a growing sense of panic, triggered by a continuous barrage of mysterious text messages that seem to arrive at the most psychologically damaging moments. These aren't just random spam texts or minor annoyances. They are highly targeted, deeply unsettling communications that strip away his sense of security and leave him feeling perpetually exposed to an unseen threat. Every single time his phone vibrates in his pocket or emits a sharp notification chime, a jolt of pure adrenaline courses through his veins, making his heart hammer violently against his ribs. He finds himself constantly looking over his shoulder, jumping at mere shadows, and living in a state of profound insecurity. The most agonizing part of this ordeal is his complete inability to stop it. He is a man who is deeply accustomed to being in control of his environment, yet he now finds himself entirely at the mercy of a faceless tormentor who holds all the cards, plunging him into a dark, bottomless abyss of helplessness and despair. Driven to the absolute brink of his sanity by this relentless digital harassment, Andre realizes with terrifying clarity that he can no longer fight this invisible war alone. In a moment of sheer desperation and mounting dread, he reaches out to the one person he believes possesses the unique, specialized skill set required to navigate this treacherous technological landscape, Smitty. Andre's plea for help is fraught with intense urgency and a palpable sense of terror that he can barely conceal. He doesn't just need a casual favor from a friend. He needs a vital lifeline before he completely drowns in his own paranoia. He tasks Smitty with a critical, time-sensitive mission to trace the complex origin of these cryptic messages, unmask the hidden identity of the phantom sender, and pinpoint the exact geographical location of the person who is systematically dismantling his peace of mind. Andre hopes against hope that uncovering the blackmailer's identity will finally give him the crucial leverage he desperately needs to put an end to this psychological torture once and for all. Smitty, immediately recognizing the severe gravity of Andre's situation and the genuine fear in his friend's eyes, wastes absolutely no time and dives headfirst into the complex, convoluted web of digital forensics. With his fingers flying rapidly across the illuminated keyboard, Smitty initiates a series of highly sophisticated tracing protocols, attempting to peel back the heavy layers of encryption and routing proxies that the cunning sender has meticulously put in place to mask their trail. The tension in the dimly lit room is thick enough to cut with a knife as endless lines of glowing code cascade down the multiple computer screens. Suddenly, the rapid, rhythmic clicking of the keys comes to an abrupt halt. Smitty's eyes narrow sharply as a chilling, unexpected piece of information materializes on the main monitor. The results of the trace are not what either of them expected to find. Instead of tracing the malicious signal to a remote, anonymous server halfway across the globe or some hidden offshore account, the raw data reveals a terrifying truth. The digital footprint is incredibly, horrifyingly close. The person orchestrating this ruthless campaign of terror is not operating from a safe distance. They are practically in Andre's backyard, lurking in the immediate vicinity, and watching his every move with predatory precision. Before Andre can even begin to process the horrifying implication that his tormentor is hovering so dangerously close by, the suffocating, heavy silence of the room is violently shattered by the sharp, piercing sound of a new message notification. The timing of the text is too perfect, too maliciously calculated, suggesting that the sender knows exactly what they are doing and perhaps even knows that Andre is actively sitting there trying to track them down. With a visibly trembling hand, Andre reaches for the sleek device, the bright screen illuminating his pale, sweat-slicked face with a harsh, unforgiving, artificial glow. This time, the incoming message is not just another cryptic string of threatening text. It is accompanied by a heavy multimedia attachment. As the high resolution image slowly downloads and renders on the screen pixel by pixel, the air in the room seems to completely evaporate. It is a photograph, crystal clear and undeniably authentic, featuring the faces of two distinct women. The emotional and psychological impact of the photograph is instantaneous, profound, and entirely devastating. Even Smitty, a seasoned technological professional who has seen his fair share of shocking digital discoveries and illicit materials, is visibly stunned by the image, his jaw going slack as he registers the specific subjects of the picture. But for Andre, the reaction is nothing short of catastrophic. He freezes entirely in his chair, his eyes widening in absolute, unadulterated horror as all the remaining color rapidly drains from his face, leaving him looking exactly like a man who has just locked eyes with a ghost. His breathing becomes alarmingly shallow and erratic, his chest tightening painfully as a massive wave of paralyzing fear washes over his entire body. This single, silent image acts as a brutal, unforgiving key, forcibly unlocking a sealed vault of dark, deeply buried memories that he had spent years and countless amounts of energy actively trying to suppress and forget. He realizes with sickening, undeniable clarity that these messages are not random acts of malice. They are a highly targeted exhumation of a toxic secret from his past, a secret so fundamentally devastating that its revelation could easily destroy everything he holds dear in his current life. As the initial shock begins to settle into a cold, hard, and permanent dread in the pit of his stomach, Andre's mind races uncontrollably through a million terrifying worst-case scenarios. The walls of his carefully constructed life are rapidly closing in on him, and the fragile illusion of control he had desperately clung to is now completely, irrevocably shattered into a million pieces. The dark past he had so meticulously buried, covering it with thick layers of denial, distance, and carefully constructed lies, is now being violently dragged into the unforgiving, burning light of day. He understands now, with absolute certainty, that this situation has escalated far beyond a simple nuisance or a generic threat. It is a calculated, deeply personal extortion, a slow and agonizing tightening of a very real noose around his neck. The unknown blackmailer holds the ultimate leverage over him, and Andre is painfully, acutely aware that the trajectory of these events is spinning wildly out of his control, threatening to completely obliterate his peaceful present life and violently drag him back into the darkness he thought he had permanently escaped. Amidst this agonizing, invisible internal turmoil that threatens to tear him apart, Andre is cruelly forced to maintain the convincing facade of a normal, happy life, leading to a jarringly dissonant and incredibly uncomfortable encounter with Dani. They meet up shortly after his harrowing, life-altering session with Smitty, and the stark contrast between their respective emotional states could not possibly be more extreme. While Andre is silently drowning in a suffocating sea of paranoia and repressed terror, desperately trying to keep his head above water, Dani is practically glowing with effervescent joy and boundless, infectious enthusiasm. She has just returned from an incredible, life-changing trip to London, and she is eager, almost bursting at the seams, to share every single detail of her overseas adventure with him. Her voice is bright, musical, and animated, completely oblivious to the dark, violent storm raging just beneath Andre's carefully composed, rigidly held exterior. Dani enthusiastically launches into a vibrant, detailed recounting of her travels, quickly pulling out her phone to showcase a massive digital scrapbook of her journey. She swipes rapidly through picture after picture, her lively commentary painting a vivid, colorful picture of her experiences abroad. She shows him breathtaking panoramic shots of iconic landmarks bathed in the warm golden hour light, bustling, vibrant street scenes that perfectly capture the chaotic energy of the city, and elegant, towering architecture that speaks of centuries of rich history. Her excitement reaches an absolute crescendo as she proudly displays a photograph documenting her unexpected and thrilling encounter with a prominent duke, breathlessly detailing the serendipitous, almost magical circumstances that led to the royal meeting. Andre nods mechanically and forces polite, strained smiles, his verbal responses hollow and entirely automatic, as he expends every single ounce of his remaining physical and mental energy just trying to keep his hands from shaking visibly and his voice from trembling with underlying terror. The cheerful narrative of Dani's trip takes a sudden, sharp, and entirely unexpected turn when she begins to speak with great affection about a new acquaintance she made during her time across the pond. With a warm, genuine smile radiating from her face, Dani formally introduces Andre to her new friend, Heather. She describes Heather with glowing, unreserved admiration, painting a picture of a young, stunningly beautiful, and incredibly charismatic woman who left a profound, remarkably lasting impression on her during their brief time together. Dani speaks fondly of their instant, undeniable connection, the long shared laughs over afternoon coffee, and how this seemingly chance meeting felt like the beautiful beginning of a wonderful, long-lasting friendship. To perfectly illustrate her point and share her joy, Dani swipes eagerly to the next photo on her screen, proudly presenting a clear, bright picture of Heather directly to Andre, fully expecting him to share in her delight and compliment her new friend. The exact moment Andre's eyes land on the digital image of Heather, his entire world screeches to a violent, sickening halt. The polite, attentive, and carefully constructed mask he had been wearing completely shatters into a million irreparable pieces right in front of Dani. A raw, visceral, and entirely uncontrollable panic seizes his entire body, his pupils dilating massively as a jolt of pure, unadulterated shock electrifies his nervous system. For an agonizingly long, silent second, he is completely physically paralyzed, staring blankly at the screen as if it were a highly venomous snake poised to strike him dead. The air leaves his lungs in a sharp, involuntary gasp that is impossible to hide. Desperate to conceal his intense, overwhelming reaction, he abruptly and clumsily averts his gaze, physically pulling his body away from the phone as if it were burning him. He begins to stammer uncontrollably, his words stumbling awkwardly over one another as he frantically attempts to change the subject, bringing up trivial, entirely unrelated topics in a clumsy, transparent bid to redirect Dani's attention away from the photograph and the specific name that has just detonated like a massive bomb in his fragile mind. However, Dani is an incredibly perceptive, intelligent woman, and Andre's bizarre, highly erratic, and completely out of character behavior does not go unnoticed by her sharp eyes. The stark, undeniable contrast between his previous polite, mild disinterest and this sudden, explosive display of sheer panic is absolutely impossible for her to ignore. She closely observes the sudden, rigid tension in his broad shoulders, the nervous, cold sweat rapidly forming on his brow, and the desperate, darting, fearful movements of his eyes. As she silently watches him flail desperately for a new, safe topic of conversation, the analytical gears in Dani's mind begin to turn rapidly and efficiently. She knows Andre intimately well enough to recognize instantly that this is not a normal, everyday reaction to seeing a simple picture of a stranger. A cold, dark seed of deep suspicion takes firm root in her heart. She realizes, with a rapidly growing sense of profound unease, that Heather is not just a random woman Dani happened to meet by coincidence in London. The sheer, terrifying magnitude of Andre's terror strongly suggests a profound, pre existing, and highly volatile connection. Dani becomes increasingly, undeniably convinced that there is a significant, heavily guarded, and deeply troubling secret buried in the past. Between Andre and Heather, a secret so incredibly dark and serious that the mere mention of her name is enough to send Andre into a complete tailspin of desperation to keep it permanently hidden. The waking nightmare only intensifies significantly after Andre finally manages to escape the suffocating, highly suspicious scrutiny of his meeting with Dani. Alone once more in his own space, the relentless, invisible tormentor strikes again with perfect, cruel timing. His phone buzzes aggressively, delivering yet another chilling, perfectly calculated message. This time, the text is practically dripping with sinister, undeniable implications, explicitly referencing Heather by name and making it abundantly, horrifyingly clear that the blackmailer is fully aware of the recent, supposedly coincidental encounter between her and Dani. The message cruelly taunts Andre, heavily hinting that the sender is not just a passive, distant observer, but an active, malicious orchestrator, deliberately and carefully pulling the strings behind the scenes to weave Heather back into the very fabric of Andre's current fragile life. The horrifying, undeniable realization dawns on Andre like a physical blow. Heather's sudden appearance in London and her suspiciously fast friendship with Dani were not the result of cosmic coincidence or random chance, but a meticulously planned, highly strategic maneuver executed by his unseen, ruthless enemy. This terrifying new development immediately plunges Andre into an even deeper, more complex crisis, paralyzing him with a terrifying, impossible dilemma regarding Smitty's ongoing, active investigation. Previously, finding the blackmailer was his absolute only hope for survival. Now, it feels exactly like walking directly into a perfectly laid trap. Andre is entirely consumed by the agonizing, paralyzing fear that if Smitty continues to dig deeply into the digital trail, utilizing his advanced skills, he might inadvertently unearth the very dark secrets the blackmailer is actively using as leverage against him. If Smitty accidentally uncovers the dark, unforgivable truth about Andre's past and his toxic connection to Heather, that highly sensitive information could easily find its way to Dani. The mere thought of Dani discovering the monstrous, hidden reality he has so desperately hidden from her is infinitely more terrifying to Andre than the actual blackmail itself. He is caught in an absolutely impossible lose-lose bind, abruptly stop the investigation, and remain permanently at the mercy of a ruthless, demanding extortionist, or let Smitty proceed with his work and risk the catastrophic, world-ending exposure of his past to the woman he cares about more than anything. As the invisible walls continue to close in tightly around him, leaving Andre with virtually no room to breathe or maneuver, a massive, terrifyingly unanswered question looms over his every single waking thought, casting a long, dark, and suffocating shadow over his entire future. What specific role does Heather truly play in this intricate, highly malicious, and dangerous game? Is she merely an innocent, unknowing bystander, a simple pawn who has been unknowingly manipulated and maneuvered into crossing paths with Dani by the brilliant mastermind behind the text? Or is she, in fact, a willing, active participant, fully aware of the immense destruction she is helping to orchestrate and execute against him? Perhaps most terrifying of all the possibilities, is she the ultimate key, the central, vengeful figure the blackmailer is utilizing to force Andre to finally, painfully face the devastating, long overdue consequences of his past actions? As the invisible, suffocating noose tightens further around his neck, Andre knows with absolute certainty that his time is rapidly running out. He must urgently uncover the absolute truth about Heather and the identity of the blackmailer before the dark secrets of his past completely consume his present, destroying everything and absolutely everyone he holds dear in a spectacular, unavoidable, and highly tragic collision of lies and truth.